Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Tohal, and this is Vulnerabilities Everywhere. We are going to be talking about virtual appliances, what they are, what their role in your environment is, and what kind of the security impact they may have on your organization. First, a little bit about myself. My name is Tohal, as I mentioned. I'm a security researcher at Olka Security. I've been doing mostly malware analysis and threat intelligence and security research over the past 5 years. And for the past year and a half, I've been focusing mostly on different kinds of threats in the cloud environment. You can find me on Twitter at maliciousdelish. Although I'm not very active there tweet-wise, feel free to send me a message, and my email is down there at the bottom as well. So let's just jump right into this. What is a virtual appliance? In essence, what we call a virtual appliance is a pre-configured virtual machine that you can subscribe to directly from either a software provider or a cloud vendor. Much like a traditional appliance, which you can get from, for example, an IDS provider, but this one you can get from the cloud provider. There are some differences. Well, first of all, they are in the cloud. As we all know, the cloud is where everything is moving to. And for an on-premise provider, that reality can be a little troubling. Implementing your product with cloud nativity in mind can take a lot of time and effort. And this time and effort equals money. So developers needed a quick and easy way to migrate their solutions to the cloud. And that's why we have virtual appliances. Virtual appliances can be sold and distributed directly through the cloud providers' so-called marketplaces. You can browse offerings from hundreds of vendors with thousands of options for every need you have, from an SQL database to vulnerability management and even user management. Second of all, virtual appliances are easy to deploy. In just under 10 clicks, you can have a server up and running in your environment. No need to wait for a representative to sell you on any features that you'll never use. No need to wait on a technician to come and plug the appliance into the wall physically, and no technical support to verify your account with the billing department, whatever, which actually leads me to my third point, which is they are just as hard to configure as normal appliances. You still have to configure the software to do whatever it is you wanted it to do. You still have to deal with networking issues, firewalls, not firewalls, security group rules, access management permissions, all that good stuff is still very much there. But this time, in many cases, there's no one there to guide your hand through all of it. You'll have to actively reach out to support, who is unfortunately not always familiar with products being sold through the marketplaces. Well, what is the problem with all of this? Vendors don't really maintain their appliances. We found out that the average image is aged over 14 months. And in those 14 months, new vulnerabilities were found, security patches were being delivered, even new features that you might care about were added. This means that out of the box, these appliances may actually pose a serious security risk. This is not something that you would expect from an on-premise appliance, which you just pulled out of an actual literal physical box. We found this out actually just by simply looking at some of our customers' environments and going, hey, what is this server that hasn't been patched in over 2 years and looks like a giant security hole just waiting to be hacked? So with that in mind, we set out to gather as much information as we could about the state of virtual appliance security and what you can expect from when you subscribe to one on a marketplace. First, let's talk a little bit about the method that we use to scan those appliances for vulnerabilities. Traditionally, you would need to install an agent or configure some sort of remote access to the machine via SSH or RDP. And this obviously takes a long time. And if we were going to scan as many appliances as possible, that would have taken an inordinate amount of time, not to mention the manpower. So instead, we used the cloud platform's own API to create a snapshot of the appliance's disks, then take those disks and mount them to our pre-configured scanner, and then use those mounted volumes and analyze them. This not only allowed us to scan for vulnerabilities and out-of-date packages, but also to detect any misconfigurations, such as weak passwords, and any sensitive information that was left behind by whoever created the image. Thankfully, we didn't encounter many of these, so that part we left out of scope for this particular research. Now, to be honest, when we started with the idea for this research, we were going to scan just about the top 10 or top 20 most subscribed virtual appliances on the market. You know, let's go, in and out, 20 minutes adventure. Turns out this data is not publicly available. So if anyone from AWS, GCP, or Azure, if you're listening, can we please have that information? Thanks, that'd be super useful. Anyhow, even after we decided to scan all the things, we figured we should start out small. So just to test the waters, see how the flow of the data would be. So the first order of business was to figure out how to subscribe to marketplace products automatically, which already we hit our first bump in the road. Marketplaces have no APIs. You have to browse to them with a browser, read through the terms and conditions, click accept, wait for the cloud provider to process your acceptance, and only then can you go through the configuration process and launch the VM. However, being a devout follower of don't spend 5 minutes doing manually what you can spend 5 hours failing to automate mantra, I spent a few hours doing just that. And this is what my machine looked like after launching 3 instances of Selenium. And that was pretty much my face. Selenium to the rescue. Of course, you can't fully automate something and expect nothing to break. At first we thought, hey, many of these subscriptions are free. So let's go ahead and subscribe, accept all the terms and conditions, yada, 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 and worry about launching the instances later. Little did we know, nobody on the other side of the marketplace has ever imagined that anyone would subscribe to over 1,000 products at once. I would say we discovered a new kind of attack, the self-denial of service. Because after subscribing to 1,039 products, our account was completely locked out. Aside from being able to log into the console, we weren't able to perform any API actions, including unsubscribing. The kind people in tech support have also never encountered anything like this. So it took the combined effort of both of us to over a week to actually figure this out. Eventually, they had to manually unsubscribe us from 40 of the products on their end, so we could unsubscribe from the other 999. On the subject of breaking things, how about your bank account? See, when you go to subscribe to a product, you have a few things to take into account when you're, as far as your cost goes. You have the, oh, I spoiled the surprise. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, you have the cost of the software hourly, and you have the cost of the underlying infrastructure. However, in a small number of products, you have another fine print, shall we say, cost of a monthly subscription. We only found that out after encountering this little blip in our billing. Yeah, that was a fun Sunday. Carrying on. Once we overcame these little bumps in the road, it was mostly smooth sailing. While we did rack up quite a bill from our cloud provider just in infrastructure, the data was flowing in nicely. The data we were most interested in is, of course, what vulnerabilities were present on the appliance. This includes operating system vulnerabilities and known software vulnerabilities. If an appliance was to include an old version of SSH, for example, that would have an impact on its security posture. I do want to stress, however, that we did not scan for any potential unknown vulnerabilities, despite what some of the vendors thought. We'll talk about that later, though. We also decided to not include any subscriptions on the marketplace that were simply base versions of operating systems, such as Windows, Ubuntu, Arch Linux, etc. While they are being offered on the marketplace the same way that virtual appliances are, we feel that they are regarded less as appliances by customers and more of a convenient way to install a blank OS, and that if that's what you're looking for, you are far more likely to apply any patches yourself. So now that we've gathered all our data, let's talk a little bit about the results. This table represents how we scored each appliance based on its security. Each appliance was given a score between 0 and 100 in 5 different categories. The underlying operating system being used, the number of critical vulnerabilities, vulnerabilities with a CVSS score over 9, CVSS score over 7, and the overall number of total unique vulnerabilities. Each category was then given a relative weight in the final score out of 100. For the operating system, you can only either get a 0 or a 100, depending on whether you were using an operating system that was still being supported by the distributors. For critical vulnerabilities, we defined 17 of them, which represent things like EternalBlue, BlueKeep, HeartBleed. Yes, we still found HeartBleed on machines in 2021. Apache struts, basically vulnerabilities which are very easily exploitable by even the most unskilled script kiddie. For every one of those found on an appliance, we deducted 25 points out of 100, which was 30% out of the final score. And as you can see in the rest of the table, the weight and scoring method for the rest of the vulnerabilities, but I want to pause for a second and talk about some of the statistics of what we found. More than 1 out of 10 appliances we scanned was running an operating system which was no longer being supported. We're talking things like Windows Server 2008. 2008, people, that's an operating system which is celebrating its bar mitzvah. This is simply not acceptable. Almost half of the appliances we found were found to have at least 1 critical vulnerability. This means that if you're grabbing just any random appliance off the marketplace and you expose it to the internet, there's a 50-50 chance that it will get hacked by someone just running a scanner of the internet within a few days. And I also want to point out that 9.5% of the appliances were so riddled with vulnerabilities, they scored a whole 0 in points of the overall number of vulnerabilities. Just like that sink in, that means an appliance out of the box, you pull it out and you already have to deal with over 400 security or stability issues. Now, luckily, there's a bit of a bright point to this. Some of the appliances we tested were actually really well maintained. 8% of them scored a perfect A+, which means they were running an up-to-date operating system. All the installed packages were their latest available versions, and we found virtually no vulnerabilities. Almost a quarter of the appliances scored an A, so we did find a few vulnerabilities or security issues with them, but nothing that we would consider a major risk. However, going back to the dark side, 31% of appliances scored D or F, which I would consider something that you probably did not want to introduce to your production environment. And the rest were somewhere in between. I wouldn't worry too much about them just coming out of the box, but probably still the first thing I would do is run a yum update or apt update when I launch them. Another interesting, although honestly pretty much to be expected trend, which we observed in this research, is that the older an appliance image is, or how much time has passed since it was first created, was in direct correlation to how many vulnerabilities we found. This is obviously very much to be expected, but I just wanted to show this graph to you guys to show you visually how clear the correlation is. As you can see, the younger an image is, the higher it's scored in our scoring method. So now that we've gathered our data and we've analyzed it, what are we going to do with it? Well, I mean, obviously, we are going to publish the data and we are going to present it in conferences such as this one. But what else? First of all, we needed to ask ourselves a few questions. What is interesting about this data? What value does it provide? Who is going to benefit from this data? And what are we going to do with it? And the answers are, first of all, what is interesting about this data? That is that we found vulnerabilities everywhere. What value does it provide? We can learn a lot from this. For example, don't trust the vendor of an appliance to keep it up to date. Who is going to benefit? You, CISOs, developers, security researchers, anyone that is thinking of migrating to the cloud or is having their development environment in the cloud. Maybe you already have an appliance running in your environment and now you are going to go check on its security posture. That's a win for me. And what are we going to do? We gotta fix it, or at least we're going to try to. As you can imagine, doing security disclosure to 540 different vendors is no small task. Trying to disclose a new vulnerability to a single vendor is hard enough. And now we were trying to get 540 of them to act on old ones. The first and probably biggest challenge we faced was just figuring out who the hell to contact. And I want to really linger on this point for a second. If you are working for a company who cares about security, and since you're listening to me right now, I'm assuming that you do, please, if you take only one thing away from this talk, is please implement a security.txt page on your website. This will make my and every other security researcher's lives are so much easier. And you can go to securitytxt.org, which, by the way, I'm not affiliated with in any way, and read more about this. But the number of vendors that we tried to contact and the person who got back to us tried to set up a sales meeting, I mean, let me tell you, it was more than 5. In the end, 15% of the vendors responded to our emails. Most of them were very kind and tried to work with us to understand exactly what the issue we were pointing out was. On the other hand, 40% of those who responded just waved us away by claiming it wasn't their responsibility to keep those appliances up to date. And another 26% just shut us down because the vulnerabilities we found were not related to their product, which, I mean, if you're selling a virtual appliance on the marketplace and you choose to include an outdated version on SSH server on it, and the only way to connect to the appliance is via that SSH server, I'm sorry, but that's on you to fix. Now, let's not be all negative. Like I said, many of the companies we reached out to were very friendly and worked very closely with us to fix their appliances. You can see some of the names we felt deserved a special shout out on your screen. However, without mentioning any names, I want to quickly gloss over how not to respond to security disclosure. If we point out a security issue with your product, how you don't respond is with an email from your lawyer. There really is no quicker way to get an exploit published on Twitter than to threaten the researcher who wrote it with legal action. Trust me. And let me tell you, all 3 vendors who sent us a fancy letterhead are still very much included in the final report. Okay, so we've written our report, battled our way through disclosure. What impact did we have? Over 100 images were updated. I know that includes only 5% of all products that we've scanned, but do keep in mind that this only represents products from vendors who have answered our emails. And of course, every little bit counts. Some of the vendors have even taken the time to make sure this never happens again, and that their images are being updated on a regular basis by implementing a new pipeline that their products go through and update the images on the marketplace. Additionally, 45 appliances were completely removed from the marketplace. We would, of course, like to thank everyone who took their time and took our feedback to heart and fixed the issues that we have pointed out. So going forward, what can we learn? First, trust but verify. If you choose a virtual appliance from a reputable vendor, you're most likely going to have a good experience. We would still recommend running APT or YUM or whatever update when you first boot the VM, just to be on the safe side. Second, and this may be more of a point for the cloud platform vendors, we think that the products on the marketplace should be maintained a little better. I mean, if I could have it my way, images would simply be retired after a year or so that they have been on the marketplace without any updates. But we do understand that that may be a little bit extreme. Maybe show the date at which the image was created next to the product's version. These are just some ideas, and obviously we welcome any conversation on the topic. And my last point would be is that we're living in a shared responsibility world. And that shared responsibility model does not only apply to the relationship between us as developers and the cloud computing provider, but it also stretches to third parties that are also moving to the cloud along with their customers. Now, let's do a quick summary. I think we have quite a bit of time left. As an IT professional or a developer using the cloud platform and utilizing virtual appliances, do note that they require more attention out of the box than an actual box with blinking lights that is sitting in your server room. Routine maintenance is your recipe for a secure environment. If you're offering any kind of service, be reachable to security researchers. I promise we're only trying to help. In the end of the day, it is in both sides' best interests to work together in order to make the cloud a more secure place. And as we move more and more towards having our infrastructure in the cloud, the shared responsibility models seems to be shifting more towards the consumer. I know we are only in the beginning stages, and this is a very early observation to make, but you as a consumer should communicate with your service provider to make sure whose responsibility it is to keep the software and your appliances up to date. Thank you very much for your time.